Automakers are starting to copy Tesla and BYD. Why exactly are they copying them? And is this a good idea, or should they have actually been doing this a long time ago? Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Electric Viking. My name is Sam Evans. I'm coming to you here from Melbourne, Australia. Welcome to all you new subscribers. Welcome back to everyone else. 2022, it's going to be an amazing year. And you know what? I've got to say, more and more companies now are looking at some form of vertical integration. In fact, they're all going on about it. Interestingly, the other day, Mercedes said, oh, well, you know what? We're going to actually start making our own motors for electric cars, but we're not going to do that until 2025. But hey, that's good news. Now, interesting here, BYD has been making its own electric motors for many years. So as you can see, in a number of ways, Legacy Auto are way behind electric car startups. Now, I know BYD is not technically an electric car startup, but Tesla is. And there's a number of other electric car startups in China who are doing more and more vertical integration, copying Tesla and BYD. Why are they doing that? Well, supply chain issues are causing massive problems over the last year for Legacy Auto. And finally, Legacy Auto is starting to realize, well, actually, to integrate all the parts in our car, if we make them in-house, well, then we can integrate them all together, and that would make sense, right? Well, the interesting thing is here that automakers in the legacy manufacturing world didn't used to do what they do now. In the early days of industrialization, most manufacturing companies were actually vertically integrated. This is a new concept of outsourcing everything to other companies. Now, automakers such as Ford owned mines and even steel mills generating their own power. Now, Evernex says that over the decades, as global supply chains grew more sophisticated, automakers outsourced more and more, and I should say personally, more and more and more. If you actually have a look at what some of the automakers now do, they make almost nothing themselves. They basically just take from a parts catalog of different cars and stick it all together. The funny thing is, even in some cases, they don't even stick it all together. Even in the case of Toyota, they often don't even build the cars themselves. They outsource that to companies like Magna Steyr and other assembly companies who actually even assemble the cars for them as well. Now, Tesla was heavily criticized early on for trying to manufacture things in-house. In fact, the media still criticizes them for doing that. The founders of Tesla relied on the established global web of products and services to produce the Roadster. Some of the things they tried to make in-house were a bit of a disaster, like the transmission for the Roadster, after the company blew them up over and over and over again. Now, the Roadster was truly a world car. The carbon fiber body panels actually came from French firm Sotira. The brakes and the airbags were made by Siemens in Germany. The chassis and much of the suspension were built by Lotus in the UK, and the gearbox was made in Michigan by Borg Warner. But like I said, Tesla had to modify a lot of these parts to make them work for the Roadster. Roadsters sold in North America were assembled by Tesla in California, but those bound for customers in Europe and elsewhere were assembled by Lotus in the UK. Now, as Tesla moved on to produce the Model S and the Model X, it began to find the outsourcing model was very problematic. Suppliers couldn't implement innovations as quickly as the fast-moving young company wanted. And they sometimes assumed that sales projections were over-optimistic and thus failed to produce parts in sufficient quantities. And that's probably a current supply chain reason for why Legacy Auto has had so much trouble manufacturing cars over the last 2 years. Now, Tesla's leaders knew they would need to secure a supply of batteries, massive supply, as they moved towards mass production. So the company teamed up with Panasonic at the Nevada Gigafactory. Now, more recently, Tesla has started working with a number of other battery suppliers, and in 2020, it began making some of its own battery cells. Now, obviously, Tesla has made comments numerous times saying any company that wants to work with us in the battery field, we are very open to working with them. CATL, I believe, will become Tesla's largest supplier of batteries by 2025. And if you have a look at the supply of batteries to automakers, that is one of the key bottlenecks. Tesla clearly has a lead over everyone except for BYD in terms of battery supply. There is no other automaker that has anywhere near the battery supply that Tesla does currently. Tesla developed early versions of Autopilot in partnership with the Israeli firm Mobileye. But in 2016, the companies parted ways. When it introduced Autopilot 2.0, Tesla replaced Mobileye's hardware with its own sensor system called Tesla Vision. Tight integration of hardware and software is critical to fast, efficient progress, said Tesla Autopilot Program Director Sterling Anderson at that time. Moving quickly frequently requires bringing the solution in-house. Tesla has gradually brought more and more design and production under its own roof. It's the only automaker to build its own seats, as far as we know. If that's wrong, let me know in the comment section below. In a 2017 Wired article, Greg Reichow, who was Tesla's VP of production during the historic transition from low-volume Roadster production to the highly automated assembly of Models S and X, by the way, it's nowhere near as highly automated then as what it is now, described Tesla as more vertically integrated than any car company since the heyday of the Ford Rouge plant in the 1920s. I don't think he knew who BYD were, so maybe that's why he made that claim. Most people don't, that's fair. Now, as they have done in many ways, and should be in many others but are not, legacy automakers are following Tesla's lead and moving back to more vertical integration. For those of you who would criticize this comment, I should ask you a question. If we combine the stock market value of Volkswagen, Toyota, Ford, General Motors, BMW and Honda, we put all those together, how much are they worth in comparison to the stock value of Tesla? As a recent piece in the Wall Street Journal reports, automakers have been investing in joint ventures to secure their supply of battery cells and raw materials. The Volkswagen Group, General Motors and Stellantis recently announced deals to line up supplies of lithium. General Motors said in December that it will join the Korean steel and chemical firm POSCO, P-O-S-C-O, to build a North American factory to produce cathode materials. Volkswagen plans to build a similar cathode material battery factory in partnership with Belgian materials company Umicore, and apparently Volkswagen also are planning their own battery company in Europe. Now, the supply chain for electric vehicles is very different from the one that automakers have built up over decades for ICE vehicles, and the transition to EVs is disrupting traditional relationships between automakers and the suppliers, according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, for automakers to rely on suppliers to develop their battery technology would be like not making their own engines, said Thomas Schmoll, CEO of Volkswagen Group Components. And believe it or not, some automakers don't actually build or develop their own engines. I mean, obviously, most of them don't do that at all now. Most automakers have shut down their engine development departments, moved those into electric departments. But the point is that even though you may think a lot of engines actually were built by those brands, they often weren't. Now, Ken Morris, General Motors VP of Electric and Autonomous Vehicles, said at a recent press event that bringing more of its battery supply chain in-house was critical to meeting the company's profitability and environmental goals. Vertical integration will help us do it quicker at a lower cost and more sustainably. Now, I remember over the last few years, I'd often read comments in forums, and many people were highly critical of Tesla's vertical integration methodology. They said it wouldn't succeed in the long run, and that Legacy Auto knew what they were doing by relying on other external companies, and that was the best way to do it. Trying to make things in-house was a mistake. I would say if you gave me $1 for the amount of times I saw comments along those lines, I'd be a very, very wealthy man today. But the story now is changing. What will those people say now that Legacy Auto are starting to embrace this methodology? There are several reasons that vertical integration is coming back into style. The ongoing wave of supply chain disruptions is making manufacturers think twice about the current extent of global outsourcing. Everybody wants to secure the supply chain and not repeat the very painful experience of the semiconductor shortage, Umicore CEO Matthias Miedrich told the Wall Street Journal. One reason Tesla has navigated the semiconductor shortage far better than the legacy brands is its tight control of its computer software and hardware. I should mention another key reason. They only sell basically one model of car. The Model 3 and the Model Y are one and the same thing. That is a key reason as well. Very smart. And it's one of the key reasons I keep criticizing Legacy Auto for saying, we're going to have 70 different electric car models for sale in 2027. I think 70, really? That's really confusing to the customer and incredibly difficult for your supply chain. Imagine the number of parts and different manufacturing products that are needed to supply 70 different electric cars. By the way, that's Volkswagen's plan, 70. Tesla, born in Silicon Valley, never outsourced their software. They write their own code. Morris Cohen, a professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, told the New York Times. They rewrote the software so they could replace chips in short supply with chips not in short supply. The other car makers were not able to do that. That's one of the reasons though. I mean, Tesla could do that because they only had one model of car, Model 3, Model Y, same thing basically. So they had to rewrite the software for one model of car. But imagine doing that for 70 models. This is why I think it's a mistake to go and try to have too many different cars, too many different models of car. Producing parts closer to final assembly plants also can reduce the carbon footprint and the cost of manufacturing. Right now, there are materials and inputs into this value chain that are zigzagging the complete world, said Anirvan Kumar, GM's Executive Director of Global Purchasing and Supply Chain. We see an opportunity in terms of making the value chain a lot more sustainable and leaner. Now, obviously, I'd be very cautious about taking advice from anyone working at General Motors right now, considering they produced 26 electric cars in the final quarter of 2021. But that said, of course, if you're in the industry, you're in the industry. You still have some awareness of what's going on, surely. Now, here's a comment from Sam on the point of this article. He says, another puff piece that acts like every legacy car manufacturer needs to follow Tesla to be successful. It's not like they've been successful for decades without the help of Tesla. We find the company's perspective as an aftermarket supplier of Tesla accessories interesting and are happy to share its content free of charge. Interesting is not the word I would use, says Sam. I find the perspective of a company that relies on Tesla to be successful as biased. Companies shouldn't follow Tesla's lead, is what Sam is saying. Now, do you agree with Sam? Personally, you know my feelings on this. I believe Tesla has the highest margins in the industry, 30% for a reason. Volkswagen's margins are 10% for a reason. Industry margins are 8% for a reason. You have to find out what those reasons are and pivot if you want to be a successful company. When I started this YouTube channel, I had to pivot at the start in order to make it work. I'm sorry, Sam. I'm not sure which Sam this is. My namesake, whoever you are. But to run a company successfully, you cannot continue to do the same thing once that thing stops working. Once somebody comes along and does something better, you have to work out how it is you can combat that. If you don't, you die. On that, thanks for watching the channel, and I'll see you again on the next one. Bye-bye.